I've had the pleasure of working with the King family as well as the King Chair Lecture Series for 3 years now. It's been a pleasure, and we're pleased to invite Mr. James Comey to be the holder of the chair this year. Mr. Comey will be with us for an academic year. This is the second of 6 events, or second of 5 events. There will be several events taking place next semester. And I also want to take a moment before we get started. The King family is here, if you wouldn't mind. Thank you all for your generous contributions as alum. Without further ado, I am not the person you guys are here to see today, so without further ado, I would like to invite Mr. James Comey as well as our special invited guests to the stage. Thank you.
Chief, you're on the end. Stand by. Great. Okay, thank you so much, Calvin. It's a pleasure to be back with you for the second in this series. It's great to have Gwendolyn King here. I continue to have as my objective not embarrassing the good King name. Last month, in the first event, I foreshadowed a bit this conversation we're going to have here today. I talked about how I very much wanted to be at Howard to learn different perspectives, different facts, different vantage points, and to teach. But I wasn't too ambitious in the teaching part. My goal is to teach how to have a conversation about hard things. You good? Is your microphone off? Let's see. Here? You got it? Okay, good. All right. That's all the time we have. Thanks for coming. My goal was to model how to have a conversation about really hard things. And as you know, at the urging of the students here at Howard University, we've decided to devote the entire series to the really hard thing of discussing law enforcement and race in the United States. There isn't a more important conversation to have. And you'll remember last month I said a conversation is about listening and speaking. It's not about signing up to agree with someone. It's signing up to try to understand their perspective and to share yours so that both parties walk away smarter. And I framed the conversation last month by saying the first conversation I really want to have is with people from Birmingham, Alabama, because I know a bit about Birmingham, Alabama. I know that it is one of the most important sites in American history for a variety of reasons I hope you already know coming here today. And if you don't, you'll probably get reminders through this conversation. But it's also a community that maybe in spite of that history, or maybe because of that history, has done some very healthy things in connection with the topic of law enforcement and race, has made progress in ways that might surprise a lot of people who don't know where they are today compared to where they were 50 years ago. But they're also a city that faces the challenges that most large American cities do around law enforcement and race. So there's a lot good about Birmingham, Alabama, and there's still challenges in Birmingham, Alabama. And so my goal for this session was to invite thoughtful leaders from Birmingham to come and to give you their perspective about what's working and why, and what's not working and why, and what they still need to do. And then to have a conversation first moderated by me, and then the second half of this will be the fun part, which will be a conversation where you ask questions of these thoughtful leaders from Birmingham, Alabama. So let me tell you who these folks are, give you a little bit about their backgrounds. I hope you've read their full bios in our program. But I'm going to start by introducing the woman to my left. Dana Woodruff is known as Lady Wu. And so when I refer to her as Wu, that is a term of not just respect, but of professional respect. She is a prominent talk show host on Birmingham's top, I'm not bragging about the radio station, top hip hop and R&B station in Birmingham, 95.7 JMZ. And she is the creator and host of the award-winning show Vital Show, which, and I told her I was going to use her term, which chops it up about people, places, things, and initiatives that are relevant to her audience. She's also the co-host of the underground artist show Alabama Now, which is a spin-off of her first public radio show, Wanting to Be Heard. Wu graduated from Miles College. She started her studies at Alabama State University, graduated from Miles College with a Bachelor of Arts in Mass Communications, and is, as we speak, pursuing a master's degree in couples and family counseling and psychotherapy at the University of Montevallo. She hopes to fuse communications and counseling to push the culture in a positive direction and try and find ways to break negative cycles and find new identities in people and families and communities where needed. She's also, I want to mention something personal, the proud mother of Little Miss Carmen Simone. So please welcome Lady Wu to Howard University. And I told Wu her job was to make this panel a lot cooler than it would be otherwise. To her left sits Andrea L. Taylor, who is, since 2015, the president and CEO of the Birmingham Civil Rights Institute, which will celebrate its 25th anniversary on Saturday with a gala at the museum. The Institute's mission is to help people understand the Birmingham Civil Rights Movement in the 1960s and to apply lessons learned from that history of nonviolent social change to today's human rights struggles. Ms. Taylor is a Boston native. She graduated from Boston University and has had a remarkably varied career that I can't possibly capture, but some highlights: she's worked in media, she's worked in philanthropy, education, and technology. She started out as a reporter for the Boston Globe. She served as the director of media programs at the Ford Foundation, funding documentaries like Eyes on the Prize. And she was an adjunct professor at Harvard's Graduate School of Education. Prior to joining the Civil Rights Institute, she was the director of corporate citizenship North America for Microsoft, where she hit a career milestone of distributing nearly $1 billion in cash and in-kind grants to nonprofits in America and around the world. As a kid, which was not long ago, she joined the participants in the March on Washington and was personally there and inspired by Dr. King's I Have a Dream speech. Community service and social justice has been the river that has flowed through her life. She's currently a board member at New York Public Radio, Boston University, and the History Makers, which is a very cool video oral history project at the Library of Congress focused on capturing the stories of contemporary African Americans. She has 3 adult children, she has 5 grandchildren, and she has finished the New York City Marathon. Please welcome Andrea Taylor. And last but not least, the man to the far left is A.C. Roper, who is the chief of the Birmingham Police Department and has spent 30 years in law enforcement. He grew up in Birmingham, as did Wu, and he began his career as a police officer in the Montgomery, Alabama Police Department in 1985, then came back to the Birmingham area to work in the Hoover Police Department and rose there to be assistant chief. In November of 2007, he was appointed the police chief in Birmingham, the state's largest municipal police department, and has been, not just in Birmingham, but around the country, a powerful advocate for community policing. Chief Roper has a Bachelor of Science degree from Troy University. He has a master's degree in criminal justice from the University of Alabama. He has a master's degree in strategic studies from the U.S. Army War College. He has 32 years of experience in the Army, and he is today a Major General in the United States Army Reserve. He received specialized training in police leadership and management from the FBI's National Academy, the FBI National Executive Institute, and Harvard University's John F. Kennedy School of Government. He is also an ordained minister, and he and his wife have 2 daughters. Please welcome A.C. Roper. So Chief, let me start with you. Let me start on the positive side. Tell our audience today what you think is working and has worked in Birmingham and why.
Well, let me start by thanking you for this invitation and thank everyone for being here, and it's an honor to be at this great institution. I would say what's working is we're building better community relations. Not across the whole city because it takes time, but we're seeing pockets of progress. A couple of years ago, we were named as one of the 6 cities for the Department of Justice Building Community Trust and Justice Initiative, where we're really trying to improve policing across the nation. So Birmingham was honored, our police department was honored to be one of those 6 cities selected. So we're doing some things regarding training and policy development that other departments just aren't doing yet. So it's really helping us to establish that foundation. We still have a lot of work to do, but that's helping us, and of course working with people like you see here on the panel is helping us also to strengthen relations.
You obviously spend a lot of time with other chiefs around the country. Is what you just described working better in Birmingham than in other places in your estimation? And if so, why?
I think it is working better because there has to be a top-down approach. Leadership has to really get behind it. And so as we look across the nation and see the challenges in modern-day policing, we need thoughtful, insightful, chiefs and sheriffs who really understand the challenges of policing in our urban communities. And so driving it from the top, I'm a believer. I am totally committed because this same police department where I'm chief used to chase my dad around town during the 1960s civil rights struggle. And so my dad tells stories of how the police officers would beat him up and do all those kinds of things. And so now for me to have the honor of being chief, I understand how important it is. And so having that top-down driven approach and really not taking no for an answer and understanding that this is going to take a while. This didn't happen overnight, but when you look through the decades at the challenges, it won't be an overnight fix, but we're committed to it.
Okay. Ms. Taylor, let me ask you the same question. What, as someone who's come to Birmingham from the outside, in your time there, what do you see as working and why do you think that is?
Well, I'm really very grateful to be here, first of all, on the panel, and I want to congratulate the students of Howard and Howard University on its sesquicentennial, I believe, that is happening now. So there's a lot of tradition and a lot of history here, as there is in Birmingham, and particularly at the Civil Rights Institute. And so what I am feeling as a person coming to that community from the outside, but having been in the world during the critical civil rights movement, I'm very excited and enthusiastic, as is the entire community, by the recent designation by executive order of then President Barack Obama that created the Birmingham Civil Rights National Monument. And what that really represents is two things. It acknowledges and validates the courage and the determination and the self-determination of the people of Birmingham who dealt with injustice and inequity 50 years ago and really transformed the nation. What happened there in Birmingham matters. The designation has helped the contemporary community really understand and embrace and affirm the power of that struggle and that movement, and has allowed, I think, the community to embrace its history, the good, the bad, and the ugly, because some of it is very, very tragic and very painful. It's a hard history to know and to understand and to come to grips with. But until you do that, you really can't move forward. So we still have a lot of work to do in that area, but that designation has opened up new channels of opportunity for the community in all of its diversity to come together and to be an example for the nation of the power of self-determination and also of nonviolent social change. So we have an opportunity to build on that history that for so long has been really a negative and considered a detriment. And the Institute, the Civil Rights Institute, which will in fact celebrate its 25th anniversary this week, is a part of that ongoing interpretation, an understanding of the struggle, and applying the lessons of the past to the present and to the future.
Okay. And for those of you who have not visited the Birmingham Civil Rights Institute, I highly recommend it. I accidentally attended, I think during its first year, I was there to meet a witness in a mafia case, no connection to Birmingham, and I was staying right nearby and walked over, and then got a chance to come back last year to see what you've done. Breathtaking and also a bit heartbreaking to see the history. So Lady Wu, let me come to you, ask the same question. So what's working in Birmingham and why?
What's up, Howard? Well, what's working in Birmingham? The people are working in Birmingham. Without the people actually having some type of interest in what our city looks like and what it does, nothing would be working. So the people are working. As far as this conversation talking about crime and police relations, the people are working. Even still, the people are working. The police officers are people. The citizens are people. So the efforts for us to be able to live in Birmingham together and to be able to work through issues together and to not have some of the issues that other places have, that's been working.
And why is that? And so why are the people working? Why are the connections? And that was why I invited you all here today. My impression was it is working in a way that it's not in a St. Louis, in a Baltimore, in a Detroit. Why? Because they're still human beings.
True.
Black human beings, white human beings, Latino human beings. Why?
The culture of Birmingham is different. I guess everybody says that about their home. It's different here. But in Birmingham, it's actually different. You can't go somewhere and not know somebody or know somebody's somebody. Like, we're connected and we value those connections. You know, we may argue, and you've been argued at in Birmingham. So we know we're family. So like we have these moments where we may disagree, but we come back together and we fight for the good of our city and our people, and it works. It works. And you know, somebody watching live from Birmingham may feel like, well, really, that's not true. It doesn't always work. It may not always work instantly, which I think both of my co-panelists said, but we know that eventually it does work.
And is there something, maybe it's a question for Ms. Taylor, is there something about the history of Birmingham that makes that possible? And most people would think, given the turmoil that Birmingham's had for my lifetime, it would be all messed up now. But it sounds like something unexpected has happened. Is any of that traced to the history of the civil rights movement?
Absolutely. The community, you know, was fractured. The domestic terrorism, I'm sure all of you are familiar with the history of the 4 little girls and the bombing of the 16th Street Baptist Church. Birmingham was known as Bombingham. It was really the center of activity. Dr. King came to Birmingham during the Civil Rights Movement at the invitation of Reverend Fred Shuttlesworth, who was already there and organizing. And there was a self-determination and a commitment to breaking the back of racism in Birmingham, Alabama that really is unusual. And what we see in the Institute, where we have visitors every day from around the community, around the nation, and around the world, they're trying to understand in 2017 how you could have such a horrific history of tragedy and yet move toward transformation, not just of Birmingham, but of the entire nation. The work that was done there led to the Civil Rights Act and the Voting Rights Act, and there was just a courage and a commitment to making the community a better place for everyone that really is a lesson that stands today. And not everyone was involved back in the 60s on sort of the right side of the issues. And there are still people there who might differ with some of the values and the goals, but I think we have come to understand that we are a very diverse nation. Everyone has a right to expect that they have the tools and the opportunity to create and to fulfill their full potential. And so the people of Birmingham are figuring that out, having had the history that they grappled with 50 or 60 years ago, and they continue to build. And as Wu said, it's the people. The people are really committed. They never want to go back to those days. The memory of those days are still there. We have people in the community who were marching with Dr. King back in the 1960s, and they tell the stories and they help us to never forget. But we must look to the future and be concerned about how the young people today can be empowered, how they can make a difference, and how we can continue to build on making the world a better place where everyone can thrive and develop to their full potential.
So staying with the positive, maybe I'll ask one more question of you, Chief. So you grew up there. You said your dad was chased around by the likes of Bull Connor, the infamous Public Safety Commissioner of Birmingham. What is it about the history that is a positive inheritance for you as the now police leader?
I really believe that we learned so much from it, because when Dr. King said in 1963 that Birmingham is the most segregated city in America, he meant that. And the police department was the arms and legs of this most segregated city with the most segregated government in America, because we enforced it. Bull Connor had Ku Klux Klansmen who were police officers. I still have some of the intelligence files in my office that I keep and guard like a bulldog, because it really shows how the police department monitored all the civil rights leaders when they came to town. There's an index card on Dr. King, and so this police department was just brutal. And so we've learned from that. And we want to be better, because as Dr. Taylor mentioned, we have citizens who still remember. We have foot soldiers that are still alive. And we had an incident to occur a few years ago where a couple of officers stopped a guy who was walking, and they wanted to check him out, and he was coming through an alley, and he was an older gentleman. And they stopped him, they talked to him, Everything checked out. He said he was on his way to church. They offered him a ride. He refused the ride. And the people he was going to meet filed a complaint. And so that night, actually they sent me an email. So the neighborhood president and I was lying in bed and we were sending emails back and forth. And I said, I'm going to investigate this first thing in the morning and all of that. So we got to the bottom of it. He never said the officers were rude, but what he said was, when he was talking to the officers, he remembered. He remembered the 60s. So when they offered him a ride, he thought, if I get in that police car, I'll never be seen again, because that was the reality. He said he didn't want to look them in the face when they were talking to him, because he had flashbacks to 63 and 64. And that is so sad. And so what we try to do with our younger officers now, and Dr. Taylor is so kind, every new officer that comes through our police academy, they spend a day at the Civil Rights Museum, because we hire people from all over the nation. We want them to understand that policing in Birmingham is unlike policing anywhere else because of our history. In addition to that, I teach the ethics class based on the Constitution, because we want every new officer to know from the chief that these are the expectations. If you're going to put this badge on and represent this department, these are the expectations. It's not like anywhere else, because we're held to a higher standard. And so some of that is working. And I know you're going to flip in a moment and we're going to talk about what's not working. Yep. But some of that is working. And there'll always be some friction because of the nature of policing. Nobody wants to be stopped. I mean, I've been policing now for 30 years, and when a police car gets behind me, I do like you do. I'm trying to make sure I'm driving straight, I'm in the lane, I'm not speeding and everything else, because nobody wants that kind of contact with their police department.
And say a brief word before, and I promised you I will flip to the negative while we're still in the positive. Say a little bit about the demographics of the city and the police department and how it's changed.
So yes, Birmingham, of course, was a predominantly Caucasian city, but now we're a predominantly African-American city, about 71, 72% African-American. And so we've had a string of African-American mayors now. One is about to be awarded by our first one, Dr. Richard Arrington. I'm the third African-American police chief now. And so the city has changed. Our police department, unlike some departments who have problems with their departments representing the community, our police department is predominantly an African-American police department. We're about 6 to 9% African-American. The chief is African-American, and 3 out of 4 deputy chiefs are African-American. So people in our community can look at our department and see themselves, because they need to be able to see themselves, that we have a department that adequately reflects the makeup of the city. And so we've made progress in that area. But we're still challenged, because we have some officer vacancies right now, so I need to do some recruiting while I'm here.
Well, and that's a good segue. Maybe I'll stay with you and flip to the negative, and I'm going to come to you, Lady Wu, next. So all that's important, all that's good, and as this audience knows, is a stark contrast to a lot of American cities. What's not working in Birmingham, and why?
I would say first, change is slow. There's revolutionary change and evolutionary change. Revolutionary change is fast. Evolutionary change takes time. And what we're trying to do in policing takes time. And so I think change is coming too slow for some. And I think it also depends on where you sit. Depending on what neighborhood you live in and the quality of your last police encounter, it can make a difference. What I like to tell people is, I can get on TV and say all kinds of things, but our citizens are basing their perception of our department on that last stop. So were you polite? Were you professional? Did you provide the right amount of service and do the things we need you to do? If you were rude and disgruntled and unprofessional, that's what they're basing the perception of our department on. So we continue to work those kinds of issues. And in some communities, Birmingham is made up of 99 neighborhoods. And in some neighborhoods, the quality and the relationship between that neighborhood and the police department, some are very good and some are very challenged. And so when you think about 99 neighborhoods, you can imagine that there's a varied response and a varied level of police-community relations across the board. And what I've seen, unfortunately, is the neighborhoods that need us the most, those are the neighborhoods where we don't have as good of community relations as I would like.
And then one more question for you before I come to Wu. Give them a picture of the crime trends in Birmingham.
So when we look at crime over the course of the last 5 to 6 years, crime was trending down exceptionally well up to 2014. 2015, we had an increase in homicides. 2016, an increase. In fact, 2014 was the lowest homicide total in about 50 years. But then 2015, 16, and now 17, we're battling with 16 numbers. We've seen an increase, and we've seen similar across the nation. So burglaries are down, robberies are down, auto thefts and breaking in cars, they're up. Almost a third of our cars that are stolen have the keys in them. And so we just can't figure out how to stop people from leaving their cars running and all those kinds of things. So it's a mixed breed. We need to bring the homicide totals down, but predominantly, as I mentioned earlier, our city is about 71, 72% African American, but our homicide victims are over 90% African American. And it's the challenges we're seeing with our young African American men that we're really working exceptionally hard on. But it's going to take more than the police department. It really takes a whole of government approach. Nonprofits, faith community, all of us working together on that, because the police department by itself can't solve it.
Okay, and I'm sure we're going to come back to that, but let me now go to Wu. So what's not working in Birmingham, Lady Wu, and why?
Well, what's not working? That's one of those questions that you don't go to somebody else's house and say, well, my bathroom isn't working, or my kid, you don't do that. However, because that's what I'm here for.
Right, we're at Howard's house, they want that.
Yes, that's what I'm here for, and I have to be honest with you all. It would have to be the people again, because there's always this divide with the people. So you have some other people that are focused on working and focused on getting it right, focused on fixing problems, and then you have sometimes the same people, or maybe other groups of people that aren't working, that are complaining and that are, they feel left out, they feel isolated, they feel quieted or silenced, deprived. So that makes for a bad dynamic when it comes to what is working. Sometimes the bad outweighs the good, sometimes the good outweighs the bad, so it's about balance. And in a city like Birmingham, where people feel that it's not really balanced, the demographics aren't balanced, it makes it difficult sometimes for it to work.
And when they think it's out of balance, how? When they think that, why are they saying that?
It's always the people. I mean, we create problems even when there aren't problems, and we make itty-bitty problems major problems, or we have small concerns that we make large concerns. So once again, it's the people. We have the power to fix things, we have the power to break things. And I think we get anxious. Like Chief said, a lot of times we say we want this immediate fix, or we want an immediate correction, or immediate answer or solution, but we hadn't really put in enough work to get to that point. We don't realize that it takes sometimes a lifetime to get the results that we want. And we get frustrated. And then therefore something isn't working again. It's something else that we have a new problem in.
And do you see the same variation across the 99 neighborhoods that the Chief is talking about?
Definitely. The variations are quite obvious. I know who is from a Birmingham-like city, and you have those neighborhoods that you know that those are the neighborhoods that will be very well taken care of, the citizens will be very much involved, and then you have those other neighborhoods where we really need you there, and we really want you to make our neighborhood better, but it's not really happening. Those neighborhoods.
And you grew up there,
Mm-hmm.
Are they the same neighborhoods as when you were a kid?
Absolutely. So I've grown up in 2 of those neighborhoods. One of them is one that needs, and very much so needs, special attention now. And then the other area, it's pretty okay. It's pretty self-sustaining. The neighbors take care of each other. They look after each other. They don't, it's a lot of, the issues are different. So from the western side of town to the eastern side of town, the issues are different. Those neighborhoods are different. The people in the neighborhoods and their attitudes toward each other are different. So once again, it's the
Okay, let me go to you, Ms. Taylor. What do you think is not working in Birmingham and why?
Well, I think the answer to that is in what my two colleagues on the panel have been describing, in that there's good news and there's bad news or other news about Birmingham. And let me just stay in the history lane. We're living in a very complex and very challenging moment in the history of the Republic, where we see the focus and the emphasis much more on our differences than what pulls us together. And yet we know that this is a country of great opportunity, of great wealth, and great potential. But not everyone is experiencing the same degree of nurture and an ability to move forward in this society. And Birmingham is no different than many other parts of this country in that regard. So there are those who are doing very well, and if you were to ask them, everything is fine. And then there are many others in the same general area who don't have access to good health care, to adequate education and training, to transportation services, to housing, and all the things that are needed for individuals and for communities to thrive. And part of what we do at the Institute in particular is we see the deficits that arise because people don't have a full understanding of the history. They don't know about their neighbors. They don't understand what has shaped them and what has prevented them from moving forward. And so we're in this funny period when identity is becoming more and more of an issue. People are having very difficult and sometimes confrontational conversations and reactions to the symbols of a community. Whose symbols are they? The symbols that were important 100 years ago may have outlived their usefulness, may have never really been relevant and were offensive, but now, as we become a more diverse, multicultural community, they no longer are serving us well, and we need to revisit those symbols. Whether we remove them or whether we reinterpret them, it really becomes very clear to me, and granted, I'm working in an institution that is concerned about preservation and promotion of human and civil rights and history, but unless you understand the history in its fullness and completeness, if you only have a limited perspective of the history, you're not going to be able to interact appropriately, and you're not going to be able to move beyond that history. So, looking at monuments, looking at symbols, making sure that our communities are inclusive, because if you're not being inclusive in your understanding and interpretation and sharing, then you're really missing out on all of the assets that a community has. And so as someone who did not grow up in Birmingham, who's only been there for a couple of years, but who's really I feel very privileged to be the steward of an institution like the Birmingham Civil Rights Institution that is trying to tell the story so that all of the people can understand and be nurtured by and grow from that. It's really important that we make sure that the history, not an abbreviated version, but an actual version of the history be available to all of the members of our community, particularly the young people, so that they can see the stories of inspiration about youth who changed things in Birmingham 50 years ago. They're going to need to do the same thing. We as elders have not left a perfect community. There is still much to do, and you can learn the lessons, you can interpret the lessons of history, and you can use some of the same tactics for really bringing about sustainable, meaningful, and effective social change. And unless we do that, our communities are going to be in chaos. Even those who are affluent in the communities will be holed up in their communities, barricaded in, as it were, Chief Roper. And there are many gated communities in our city And yet there's enough to go around. We need to redistribute the resources and the opportunities, and I think that's something that history can help to teach that lesson, but interaction and dialogue in a meaningful and substantive way is also a part of that process. And again, we like to think that the Civil Rights Institute is a place where people across these different communities and different perspectives and intergenerationally can come together and talk about new solutions and new ways to move forward in our community.
Well said. And Chief, I'm going to come to you in a minute with a question about what do you think is driving the crime stats you talked about. But I forgot one of the questions I wanted to ask you, Lady Wu, is you have a career that I don't know much about. You're a radio personality. I listen to the radio. But do you think you have a responsibility and a role to play as a radio personality in shaping the community and addressing the issues we're talking about here today? Or is that something you do separate from your radio work?
For me, nothing is separate. I'm all wrapped up in one. So a big part of who I am is being concerned about those same people that I continue to speak about. So I could get on the air every time I'm on and just have fun and talk about songs and, introduce the next song and play commercials. I could do that, but I wouldn't be doing what I'm supposed to be doing and what I know that I could do. So my impact is bigger to address the issues. And the response that I've gotten by just doing what I do, like it's not like I didn't ask permission to address issues. It just happened. That's what I do, and I was able to do it in a way that gave people a voice, and it was respected. So I don't see any other way to blend those two worlds, because music drives the culture drives the issues in the community. So therefore, we should address the issues through the music and through the culture. So that's my job.
Well said. Okay. Thank you. So Chief, back to you with the data-related question. So you described this increase you've seen, and other chiefs have seen, and I've talked to the audience before about how much that worried me, and I know it worried you over the last few years, trying to figure out, so what is happening? What do you think has been happening?
I think we're seeing a congruence of several factors. I think we're seeing these issues that are just colliding right now. One is, I think the socioeconomic conditions that we're facing right now, they're magnified. I think when we start thinking about poverty and lack of educational access and opportunities and good employment opportunities and all those types of things, we've always had challenges. But I think in this day of social media, it's magnified even more now. Because when we were growing up, we were poor, but we didn't know it. Everybody just kind of help take care of each other. And so I think that's one issue, but also in conjunction with that, we're seeing more heavy guns on the streets. We're seeing more guns, more assault rifles. Guns are just flooding some of our neighborhoods, and so we have that issue. In addition to that, I think the challenges over the last couple of years, more people now don't see this criminal justice system as legitimate. I think they look at it and see the challenges over the years. They see the latest video of the month of some police officer doing something, and they don't trust it. A lot of people don't trust it. So they're taking matters into their own hands. So now you're seeing more retaliatory type offenses. Okay, somebody shot at me, I'm not going to call 911. I don't trust the police, and I'm not going to be called, the snitch word, that kind of thing. I'll just go back and shoot at the house myself. And so now you're seeing this retaliatory type stuff going on in the street. And unfortunately, what happens sometimes, an innocent person gets hit. And we've seen that in Birmingham, and we've seen it across the nation. So the socioeconomic conditions, I think, are compounded. More guns on the street. More retaliation because the criminal justice system is not as legitimate as it should be. And then you throw in the drug problem and what we're seeing now with drug epidemics, all types. And so it's made for a bad mix. And so now law enforcement leaders are all trying to wrap their heads around it and trying to come up with a new strategy to approach it. And the criminal justice system, because of the problems, has tried to, in some capacity, has tried to right-size itself and has tried to do some things to fix and to address the over-incarceration and some of the things we've done in the past. And so now all of this is going on at the same time, and I don't think it's as stable as it needs to be.
And I'm going to ask you this question, I'm going to ask you this as well, Wu. What are a few things as a leader in Birmingham you can do to try and repair that, if not broken, certainly stretched and tattered tie between the community and the criminal justice system?
So we're doing some things different in Birmingham. One of the things that I'm most proud of is we're conducting listening sessions with our community members. So we started out doing them functionally. The first one I conducted was at the Civil Rights Institute with our civil rights foot soldiers, those who marched with Dr. King, where I gave them a long-awaited apology for the brutal and totally unconstitutional policing that we did through the years. They deserved an apology, and it's not that I did it personally, but the organization that I represent, the organization that I lead, was wrong, and we were on the wrong side of history. So we started there. We've met with activists. We've met with LGBTQ community members. We've met with youth. So we're doing those types of things, but it's a different kind of meeting. When I said listening session, it's not us going in, giving a report on crime. It's us saying, we're your police department, and we know we've done some things wrong. How can we be a better police department for you? And we're listening and taking notes. We're not defending anything, which is difficult for police, but we're not defending anything because we know we've missed the mark in so many areas. So now we're doing them, which I think is really going to be valuable for us. We're doing them geographically based now. So we're going in some of our most challenged neighborhoods and saying, what can we do to be a better police department? What can we do to partner with you more? We know we haven't been there. We know there's things we've done that wasn't right, but let's just start over. What can we do?
And is there a common set of things you hear from folks in the challenged neighborhoods?
Yes, and what I'm hearing the most is people want us to do more. And I think we've over-relied on police, but there's such a need out there that quite often people don't know who else to go to. We're the most visible part of city government. It's the police department. We're the ones out there riding through neighborhoods. So when I hear a community member say, Chief, we need all of your officers to be mentors. Well, we're doing mentoring. We have the biggest police athletic league in the state. But what this citizen is telling me is they need us to do more. And one citizen even told us that even though we have this friction between the community and the police, but your officers are some of the most positive role models that we see at times, that our young people see at times. So we need you all to do more outreach. And so now we've got to figure out a way, how do we do that while also responding to calls for service and doing all these other things we need to do, because if we're too slow on a call for service, that's going to be a complaint that the officer, it took him 15 minutes to get here. So we have to balance all that. And modern day policing is not easy. It's not for the faint of heart, because there's a lot of needs in our communities. So we need a whole of government approach. We've got to strengthen other institutions to help carry some of the load. And I think as Wu says, as more people work at it and more organizations work at it, we won't have to rely on the police as much. We have a need. I mean, we have a place in society, and there's work for us to do. We have a mission and role and responsibilities. But I think we've now stepped into all these other areas that is causing some people some concern.
So Wu, over to you. How do you repair the tattered fabric connecting a community and police force?
The community has to understand, the community and the police force have to understand balance, because when they get off of work, they are part of the community. The community has to understand how to interact. So as a radio personality, I've interviewed Chief since he got his position. So from the very beginning, we've had conversations about, how do you act when you're stopped? What do you say when you're approached? How do you move? Needless to say, that doesn't always happen, but it's something that we should have conversations about. Participating in forums and events like this where I can get information from the people and take it back to them. Really understanding the culture of where we are and what the issues are. If you talk about drugs and you talk about guns or whatever the issues are, understanding why those things are issues. A lot of times we dance around what the real issues are and we try to arrest the issues. You can't arrest the issues, you have to fix the issues that the people have. So as a leader in the community, that's a big part of why I do what I do, because I feel like those same people that either put in the work or don't put in the work, they have issues that need to be addressed first, and then we would see a decrease in all of the other things that he stated, because the people have then been repaired.
Could I
Go ahead, Ms. Taylor.
In both of these conversations from my fellow panelists, we at the Institute have a role to play as well, which we're trying very much to stay the course. And we've had over the last decade or more a series of conferences on race, community, and law enforcement. And the idea was to really convene people who are trying to address these issues from different perspectives in the community and bring them together for sharing and for a dialogue. And we have, excuse me, we found that to be very useful because there aren't a lot of safe spaces in the community where you can have these conversations. We were very glad to have hosted you actually last year, Jim, and to have you come to be the keynote speaker for the conference and to speak out at the 16th Street Baptist Church, again, the iconic church in Birmingham where the 4 little girls were bombed in a terrorist act in 1963. And you also extended, as I recall that presentation, an apology to the community for the work that was done and not done by the FBI, particularly after the bombing of the church, which took until the 21st century to be adjudicated before people were brought to trial, and the Ku Klux Klan members who had been responsible for that horrific tragedy to come in and bring some measure and some modicum of justice. But we know that these kinds of dialogues are really important. They're part of the healing. They're the first step. It sets up an opportunity to open up a dialogue and to begin to build trust within the community. This year, we had the conference again. We just completed it actually at the end of September. And the theme was hate crimes, which I'm sad to say, and I'm sure you know probably much better than I, the data and the statistics about the increase in hate crimes in this country. As we become more diverse, that quotient of hate crime seems to go up. And yet one of the things that was so fascinating about the conversation that we had there is that people hate people that they've never even talked with. They've never had, if it's a person from a different race or a different religious community or a different neighborhood, they hate them. But if you ask them if they've ever talked to those people or if they have any friends or acquaintances or any interaction, the answer is no. It's very easy to hate and feel disdain for someone that you don't know and don't understand. So again, it comes back to educating people, providing public education, providing a place for a dialogue, providing a place for people to exchange and focus on what is similar about all of us and not what is different, and to build so that on this little ecosystem known as planet Earth, we can find a way to move forward together. Otherwise, as Dr. King said, we will all perish as fools.
Yep, well said. So on that note, I want to get involved in a conversation with our audience. And the way this will work is, I think we have microphones in the audience. Yep, in the back. And so if you want to ask a question of the panel, please raise your hand. We'll get you a microphone. And my job will be to moderate/referee. Sir, right here in the front, the second row. You have a microphone for this gentleman?
Hi, my name is Christopher Brown. I'm a legal communications major from Birmingham, Alabama.
Yeah.
And that's actually my church member right there from Faith Chapel Christian Ministry.
Wow.
Yeah, so my question is, because as I came to Howard, and I tell people where I'm from Birmingham, Alabama, they say, the ultra conservatives or Trump supporters or whatever what as leaders of Birmingham, what are we doing to try to change the image of Birmingham?
All three of you can answer that. Where do you want to start? Who wants to go first?
That was a great question.
Go ahead, Will.
That was a great question.
What are we doing to change that? We're being who we are daily, and we're making sure that people do. Well, I can't speak on behalf of my other panel mates, but I make sure that people know exactly who I am and what I stand for. And if they have any questions because I haven't stated it, I make them know that they can ask. Don't just bunch me in because of where I'm from.
Well, so you have an audience here, not a captive audience, but close. What do people not know about Birmingham that they should know and that you tell them?
I mean, we don't still ride on horses. We don't still, nobody's riding around in the tank still telling us that black people can't sit here or drink here or eat here. That's not still happening. We are very progressive. Things are really popping in Birmingham. People are really diverse in Birmingham. People are from all around the world in Birmingham. So we have a lot of different things, not just civil rights. We have civil rights, but we also have food. We have great entertainment. We have entertainers. We have clubs. We have church. I mean, we have everything. And for some reason, people seem to think that that's not happening there, but it definitely is. You should visit.
Yep, Chief.
Yes, and let me also follow Lady Wu on that, because the city has come a long way. For example, we'll be hosting the World Games in Birmingham in 2021. The World Games, yes. It's every 4 years, and this year it was in Poland, so now we'll have it in Birmingham, and we're hosting all types of conferences and major events. We just had the Senior Olympics in town a year ago, a couple of months ago, whatever it was. So we are a city that's on the move. And so I think it's important that each of us really work to be an ambassador for the city, because we have a tough history. A very challenged history. So when people see the black and white grainy footage of the police and the dogs and the fire department with the water hoses and Bull Connor on top of the tank, and it has colored the city for so long that we really have to work even harder to show people that we are a different city. Because right now, as I mentioned, we're a predominantly African-American city. We have an African-American mayor, an African-American police chief, an African-American fire chief. Out of this 9 council members, 6 are African-American. So we're no longer at the back of the bus. We actually have an African-American that's leading the bus system. So we're no longer at the back of the bus. I mean, things have really changed in Birmingham, and we want Birmingham to really be an example of how you can come from darkness and head toward the light. You're not there yet, but you're headed toward it. But you want to always remember the history so that you'll never repeat it. And so some good things are happening there. Sure is.
But Ms. Taylor, you in a way that's why I waited for you last to answer this, because you are a custodian of that history in a lot of ways, but also a custodian of how that history drives the present. So how would you answer the Birmingham natives question?
So I would say that the Civil Rights Institute is in the catbird seat in many ways, because we do represent and have all the artifacts and the accoutrements of the history that was so difficult. And but yet we're a place where people from all over the world come. We have about 150,000 visitors every year. We expect that to go to increase. We're hoping to double or triple that number in the next 3 to 5 years. These are people who come from around the country and from around the world, and they know the history or know a little bit about it, and they're seeking to understand and to replicate and to use the example of what has been accomplished in Birmingham in their own context. Sadly, there are many still civil and human rights violations and conflicts all over the planet, and most of them are not being met with nonviolent resistance. They're much more violent kind of confrontation. So we have people who are students of the nonviolent movement from all parts of the planet, who are coming there to learn more about how Birmingham managed to transform itself and to sustain itself. And it's really a shock to a lot of people when they come, because they have these stereotypic and iconic images in their minds, and sometimes I think they expect to see Bull Connor still, literally roaming the streets, dogs, hoses, all of the accoutrements of segregation, and that is not true. Again, it's not a perfect situation, but I would invite all of you who have never been to Birmingham to make that trip. I had only been there once before I was recruited to lead the Civil Rights Institute, and I have been thoroughly enlightened by the experience that I've had there, the warmth of the people. As Lady Wu said, the food, we're one of the culinary capitals of the world. If you enjoy food, Birmingham is at the top of the list. There's entertainment there. It is a leading center of technology and medical research. It's a leading financial center. There's a lot of entrepreneurship. There are young people there who are engaged in new business development and startups. I talked to a number of the students here who are interested in entrepreneurship. There's a lot of opportunity there. It's kind of a gem in the rough, or a diamond in the rough, that people don't really know about. And again, it's not perfect. No place is perfect, and there is always room for improvement. But it's important, I think, for people to at least visit and be familiar with other parts of their world. I've lived in New York for the last 30 years, off and on, in and out, and I find that my friends and colleagues there are really quite intrigued that a Northerner would pack up and move to a place like Birmingham, Alabama, and yet they have all these stereotype images in their minds, and they've never been there. And I think one of the things that we're seeing in the broader culture in our country is the fact that, again, it's that unknown. What you don't know and what you imagine don't often align. You need to go and see for yourself, experience the community for yourself, and not be fearful, and you will be enlightened. I think if more people had that opportunity and took that opportunity, we might have a lot less contention in our broader culture than we do now, because we don't really know each other very well.
Yeah. Is it still called the Magic City?
It's the Magic City.
Yeah. Okay. Where else we got? On the aisle there, and then, in the back. The namesake of this lecture series, Gwendolyn King.
I never do this, but I have to say thank you very much for coming, because we're all learning something. When we hear Birmingham here in Washington, we sometimes think Alabama. And there may be a really good reason for that, and that's where you get your conservative Alabama, you guys voted for what's his name. We're not going to go there right now. My question, Wu, you talk about neighborhoods and people, how important that is. So, Chief, are your officers required to live in the city of Birmingham? I know you do, I'm sure the mayor does. What about the officers? Are they neighbors? Do they live in these communities, or do they live in other parts of?
So, no, they are not required to live in the city. And there's a lot of reasons for that. One is we hire under the personnel board. We're under a county personnel board, and so there's no residency requirement. We think it's a benefit for officers to live in the community, and so we have to try to encourage that. So what we do also, because we can't make them right now, we do require our officers to do volunteer work in the community when we start them out in the academy. They have to do volunteer projects because we want them to learn that community before they even graduate. In addition to that, a couple of years ago, I drafted a policy and signed it, which makes it the law of the department, where we even give officers time to do volunteer work on the clock, because we want them in the community. And we don't want every police citizen contact to be a negative, stressful contact. Oh, am I getting a ticket, or is he going to arrest me? That kind of thing. We want you build relationships before the storm hit, because once the storms hit, it's kind of late to be getting on the roof trying to patch the hole up in the roof. It's too late now. It's pouring down rain. So we're trying to give our officers opportunities to build good relationships when it's a non-enforcement kind of situation. So if we can ever get the funding to do this other thing that we're doing now, we've started a take-home car program for patrol officers, marked cars, but you can only get a marked car if you live in the city.
And a related question I should ask you, and then I'm going to go to the woman on the aisle. How are you doing attracting people to your police force?
That's one of our biggest challenges right now, recruiting and retention. And as I talk to other chiefs, we're all having this problem now with hiring good people. And so we do all the regular recruiting and all of those kinds of things. We send the hiring team out to different locations and career days in the universities and all of that, but we're still having a challenge. And I think part of that goes back to what we've faced over the last couple of years. If law enforcement is going to be a controversial profession, then you're going to have some people to say, you know, I would have been interested, but I just don't want the hassle. There's no way. And then you have family members who would say, no, I really don't want you being a police officer. When I told my grandmama I was going to be a police officer, she started crying because she came through the civil rights struggle. That was not something she wanted me to do. Well, it wasn't long. She was proud of me in my uniform and all, and the tides kind of turned. But coming through that type of era made it difficult. And now we're coming through a challenging era now in modern day law enforcement, which is making it difficult also to hire.
Yeah, and you won't say it because you're too modest. But if people like you don't make that decision, Birmingham is not like it is today. And cities all around the country will be very different if people like you don't go into that profession. So I'll put in my plug. Ma'am.
Hello, so my question is for all three of the panelists. So without really any evidence or really any logical reasoning behind it, James Comey has used the term the Ferguson effect to describe, that viral videos of police brutality or scrutiny against the police has caused higher crime rates or has caused police officers to not want to do their jobs. What are your thoughts on this?
Do I get to... You need to check on where James Comey has used the term Ferguson effect and send it to me by email. Go ahead, Chief, you start.
There's been no data pulled on it, no research. I think it's all anecdotal. But I would think there would be some concern if you're policing at the street level and you see some of the videos and the marches and the demonstrations and in some cases even riots. And today everyone is a reporter because everyone has a cell phone. And so we want officers to do their jobs right every day, regardless of who has a cell phone or not. Just get out the car, do your jobs the right way. And so whether there's some validity to that, I think the jury is still out. I think it was very concerning when you saw video after video after video. Now here's what I say when you really think about it, and it's just the power of media. The Birmingham Police Department, we dispatch 50,000 police calls a month. 50,000. If we got 99.9% right, we still messed up like 50 calls. No one remembers the 49,950. It's the 50 that's going to be on the news. So if we got 99.9% right, it's the 50 that's going to be on Facebook, right? It's the 50 that's going to be tweeted. It's the 50 on Instagram. It's the 50 that Lady Wu's going to talk about on the air because callers are going to call her and say, hey, did you see that video of that Birmingham police officer? Right? That's what's going to happen. So we have to try to get it right every single time. So those 50,000 calls a month, we have to get it right. We have to bat 1,000. We have to get it right every single time. Because all it takes is one bad call that gets out of hand and the officer loses his or her professionalism. And then we have demonstrations and everything else, and people question the validity of the organization and all of that. So we have to get it right every time, and that's pressure. That's pressure. And it's important that we get it right because we're wearing guns. And we can't afford a mistake. Because a bad mistake, if an officer has a bad day, someone can lose their life.
So
can pick
I
your
would
own
just
order.
comment briefly that, again, through our work with the FBI and the Birmingham Division and other law enforcement and conversations that we have with young people, probably half of the visitors that come to the Institute are young people. All the children in Jefferson County, where the Institute is located, come for free. And they're just, any day of the week, you'll see buses lined up and young people coming from, 4th, 5th grade through college and beyond. And we know that these young people are very concerned about the Ferguson effect because of social media and because the ubiquity of information and news. They're very aware from a very young age, and we've learned in conversations and in discussions that young people, until they're about, I think, in the 3rd or 4th grade, Chief Roper, they want to be policemen or firemen, or they want to be in law enforcement. That, if you ask them what they want to be when they grow up, and then somewhere around 5th grade, 6th grade, that all changes, and the whole view shifts. And they feel that they're at risk. The community is concerned that they are at risk, and the Ferguson effect kicks in. People are watching the news. They see what's happening. And if young people aren't on a path of some self-determination with a vision of what's possible for their future, by the time they're really 11 or 12 years old, they're at risk. And we know that the members of our community and the people who come to the Institute are very concerned about that. And we try to have programs, again, that bring sensitivity and awareness to these issues and help both the parents and the young people how to protect themselves and how to prepare themselves to deal in a world where, just randomly and for no fault of their own, they could be at risk. So there is a strong public education factor here. And again, there are also lessons to be learned from history. So we do tend to repeat what we do not learn. And I would just cite the example, I don't know how many of you know that there were 2 young African-American boys who also died on the same day that the church was bombed. And, the explosion killed the 4 little girls. One was a child who was riding his bike and was attacked by a group of young white males who shot at him, and another was killed in an altercation with the police. So this was 1963. Fast forward, we're still seeing remnants of this kind of behavior. So it's something that we as an institution that is, again, concerned about promoting and protecting everyone's civil and human rights, have an opportunity and an obligation to make that history known and to help people apply the lessons of those experiences so that these kinds of things never happen again.
Great, thanks. Lady Wu.
Just briefly, speaking to the idea of the Ferguson effect, it did a lot of different things, and the effect is affecting a lot of people every day still. When something happens, we respond immediately. Everybody's in an uproar about it when it happens. If the Ferguson effect is taken or looked at in a negative way, it's saying that we hadn't gotten it, we hadn't healed anything, we hadn't done anything yet. But if it's being looked at in a positive way, well, it's the Ferguson effect. We're reacting. We are trying to make some differences. We're trying to make some changes. We're learning about how to communicate with each other. It's all in how you look at it. It's about perspective. So I know like a lot of these phrases and terms and the Ferguson effect, it could have been the Birmingham effect when the church was bombed. It could be the Florida effect with Trayvon. I mean, just different situations that happen in different places. If we aren't fueled by them and nothing's happening, yeah, it's an effect. It keeps happening. Everybody's affected by it. So yeah, that's what it is. But how do you change it? Are we being motivated by the effects of this violence? Are we being motivated to do something? So I don't know that I take offense to the term or to the idea of the Ferguson effect, because yes, it's definitely had an effect on the whole world. A lot of people were shaken and moved by it. So that's my idea and thought on the Ferguson effect.
Okay, thank you, Lady Wu. Yes, in the back.
Hello. Excuse me if my voice is a little shaky. I don't really like speaking in front of large groups of people. My question is for all of the panelists, but it has to do with something that you said, Dr. Taylor. So, Dr. Taylor, you said that people must have a solid grasp of an unabridged history in order to bring about sustainable and meaningful change. I want to speak a little bit about history. We live in a nation in which black people 2 centuries ago were enslaved and massacred. 1 century ago, black people were being lynched, and white people would keep souvenirs from the lynched person's dead body, hacking off kneecaps and other body parts to hang in living rooms and storefronts. These atrocities were committed against black people with total and utter impunity. Today, a black teenager can be gunned down and his dead body can be left to lie in the street for hours. A black 12-year-old can be gunned down in a park for playing with a toy gun in an open carry state, and a black 7-year-old can be shot to death while she slept in her own home. All of these acts were committed by police officers with total and utter impunity. So, understanding the history of the systemic violence against black people in this nation, why should black people ever trust the police, let alone any aspect of the criminal justice system?
Oh, great question, thank you. Who wants to take it?
Well, I don't know.
It's to the whole panel, but who wants to go first?
I don't know that I have the answers for what you're describing, and we are still, again, from the last comments, we're still in the Ferguson effect. We're still seeing this happen over and over and over again in our community, and we're still struggling with how to prevent these kinds of atrocities. And it becomes even more complex every single day. Some of it is rooted in lack of economic opportunity and development. Some of it is rooted in lack of educational opportunities that people might have. Some of it is rooted in people across a number of communities feeling displaced and discriminated against. I mean, the problem is very, very complex and difficult to deal with, but even though we keep seeing variations of the same theme, we must continue to try to bring people together to have dialogue and try to create an environment that will be safe and fruitful and productive and life-giving for all. On a very personal level, I'm the grandmother of 5 children, 2 sons, 2 grandsons, and 3 granddaughters. And quite frankly, I'm very concerned and very troubled deeply by what I see in the community and what I thought we had overcome, if you will, in the era of the civil rights movement and in the time subsequently. But here we are in the 21st century having the same kind of conversations we were having in the 19th century and the 20th century and beyond. But we can't lose hope, and we can't lose a perspective that if we don't speak up and speak out, if we don't try to organize, if we don't try to change, if we don't try to bring those who would be driven and influenced by hate into our consciousness and help them to see why that is not a path that is going to solve whatever the problem is that brought them to that place. We must find a way to move forward. We don't really have any alternatives, and I think what you've been hearing today are variations on the theme from our different perspectives about how important it is to stay the course and continue to try to bring light into what otherwise could turn into a darkness that spreads very quickly.
You want to hit it, Chief?
Yes, I think that was a profound question. Where's that young man at? Profound question, and a very thoughtful question. So when I was listening to you, a couple of thoughts came to mind. One is, it would take more than criticizing this current system to change it. I think we need people who want to change it to sign up and come join us. Then you become the police officer that you think we should all be. You be the example. You treat people right. You influence your peers. Because we're all across the nation, we're looking for good police officers. There was a question earlier from the King family regarding officers being neighbors. So sign up and help us wherever you're from. If you have a heart for public service, Give 2 or 3 years. You don't even have to give a whole career. And help us be a better profession. Second, leadership. I think it's going to take leadership. It's going to take leadership and accountability. And we have some chiefs out there that are doing the things that they think is right. Like, they never make the news, but they're trying to do things the right way and hold officers accountable when things don't go the way they should go. I think also law enforcement, we're going to have to embrace change much more than we have in the past. And so when you start hearing things about like de-escalation training and all of those types of initiatives, we have to readily do that. We have to readily do the things that we can to really protect the sanctity of life as much as possible. Now, we all know, because we're not here to sugarcoat anything, there's going to be times when an officer has to use force. Because there's going to be a time where somebody's breaking in your house or whatever the case might be, you're going to call the police, and if the police officer tells the person, I need you to get in the car so I can arrest you, and the person says, I'm not going, you expect the officer to do something. Right? Yes, yes you do. You expect the officer to do something. So there's going to be times where we're going to have to use force. But that force has to be reasonable. It has to be within the confines of the Constitution and the state law and department policy. And then I think we have to do a better job of explaining why we did what we did. Because when we don't, everyone being a reporter, if someone put a 10-second snippet of a video out there when the whole encounter was 15 minutes, you look at that 10 seconds from one angle, and then we draw all these conclusions. So as a side note, we implemented a body camera program in Birmingham. It was one of the first departments in the state to do it. I was simply amazed at how nice the officers became and how nice the citizens became when everybody knew that was a camera. Everybody got nicer. Well, we've got to do more. We've got to be more creative and do things like that to really try to minimize the number of negative police contacts. Because I think that's what we're really talking about. And so we can't arrest our way out of the challenges that we're facing. That's why we need this whole of government approach. But if we continue to send the police in for every single thing, the uncle stopped taking his psychiatric medicine, call the police. My child don't want to go to school, call the police. We're relying on police too much. And every time we send the police into some of these situations where people are calling simply because they have no one else to call, we increase the likelihood of something strange happening.
I'm sorry. I feel like my question is being dark, so I'd like to come back up here and repeat it.
Okay.
I did not ask you about investigation of the use of force by police, and I asked about body cameras. My question was, I'll repeat it, and Lady Wu, I'd like to hear your answer on this as well. My question is...
Can you, rather than read the whole thing, can you just summarize the end of it, what you'd like to hear from Lady Wu?
I remember.
You remember it, okay.
Okay. My question is...
Can you give her a shot to answer? See if she answers it. Just because we're about to run out of...
Let me repeat my question because I think my question was forgotten in the context of the beginning.
Right, but if Lady Wu remembers it, you'll get the answer and we won't run out.
I'd like to hear the answer from the chief as well.
Okay, don't read it yet. Don't read it yet.
So let me say what my question was. I said, understanding the history of the systemic violence against black people in this nation, why should black people ever trust the police, let alone any aspect of the criminal justice system?
Got it, go.
So I was going to go straight to your point about trust, and I was going to use a relationship model. We enter relationships where we stay in them knowing that they aren't the best, and our trust is broken. I don't trust you, I can't be here anymore, and we go back. We try again, we keep trying, we try again. We keep trying, and we try again. And you built trust, you have to build trust. So therefore, after years and years of situations being bad and things happening, we still have to keep trying. I mean, it's a simple answer there. It's a hard situation, but it's a simple answer. We have to keep trying. We have to continue to put ourselves in those positions. Chief said, join. If you can't beat them, join them. If I can't trust you, guess what? I'm going to jump in there and try to fix it myself. If it's a broken relationship, I want to build that trust again. How can I build that trust again? You know, like if I can't trust all police officers, that doesn't mean I can't trust this one. So I need to try to build that relationship. It's about relationship building. Who am I in this situation? So I just feel like a lot of times we go emotionally into everything, and we don't really see that trust has to be built. Like, we have to rebuild it. I can't have the attitude that everybody's going to be somebody that's going to shoot me if my tag light is out, or if I'm 12 years old playing in the park, or if I'm a single mother that's, you know, I'm militant and I know what I stand for, and I'm in my apartment and they come in. I can't. It's like no way I can survive like that, thinking that I can't trust any law enforcement. There's no way I can do it.
But Chief, why should any black person trust a police officer in the United States?
So let me go back to his question, because he wanted to repeat it also. Trust is a two-way street. So if you're going to put it all on police to build trust, then we're never going to have trust. We can't go back and rewrite the past. We're all familiar with the history of black people, African Americans in this country. We're all familiar with it. We've lived it, a lot of it. So when I mention the body cameras, that's a tool that we're using to help build trust, because it helps give us the full scope of what actually occurred, so we don't run out based on a tweet. And trust is destroyed because somebody tweeted something they heard. So that's another tool that we're using. But building trust is hard. It's hard to build, but it's easy to destroy. So shouldn't we want the total picture of what occurred? We should want the total picture, not the 10-second snippet. All of that goes to building trust. Communicating helps to build trust. These listening sessions we were talking about earlier helps to build trust. But it's going to take both sides sitting down.
Okay. He asked, why should we? We should, because the job of the police force is to serve and protect. So if I need you to serve and protect, I need to be able to trust you. In order to be able to trust you, I need to build that relationship.
Okay, we've gone way over, so just one closeout question. I'm sorry I don't have any more time. One closeout question for each of you. A lot of very talented young people watching and listening to you. What should they do? Just quickly, what's your advice for young people?
Keep doing what you do. If it's right, if it's wrong, start doing what's right.
All right. Ms. Taylor?
They need to get involved. It's their future. It's not the future of the elders. We can work together intergenerationally, but the young people today own the future. It's theirs to build and to develop and to thrive in. And we need to be encouraging that development and encouraging them to get engaged. And together, the generation baby boomer, the generation millennial, the generation X, all of the generations can come together and bring whatever skill and appropriate talent they have. But it has to be, the young people need to get involved, they need to take ownership, and they need to take leadership in their own future.
I was going to say the same, get involved, and that doesn't necessarily mean wearing a uniform, but there's some type of public service need in every one of our communities. And you mentoring a young man or a young woman can help get them on the right path where we don't have that negative police contact. Voting, volunteering are all parts to really be productive citizens. And in a roundabout way, you'll be helping this law enforcement situation we're facing.
Okay, there's going to be a reception afterwards where you won't be able to get them sitting as a panel, but you may be able to, with a mouthful of fruit, be able to ask questions, follow-up questions, because we've run out of time. I don't have any more time. But you can come to the reception, though. So I want to thank our Birmingham... Sure, I'll be in there. Definitely. I want to thank our Birmingham panel for coming here. I want to thank you for what you've done in Birmingham and what you will do. Thank you.
That was fun. All right.